Good evening, everybody. This is Abby Pearsall, the planning director. Thank you all for coming tonight. What we're going to do real quick is have our planner, Mark Wojtowicz, take a quick roll call to make sure that we have a quorum to begin the meeting. Then I'm going to read a series of instructions into the record, and we will go from there.
Okay. With the roll, Joe Bunkley.
Here.
John Bashaw.
Here.
Greg Massey.
Here.
Joe DeBono. Tim Bleasdale.
Here.
Karen Barnett.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
All right, thanks again for being here, everyone. So here is just a quick set of instructions for the Planning and Zoning Commission's regular meeting of October 19th, 2020. This is a web-based call and we're operating under the following procedures. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. A recording of this video will be available within 24 hours and will be posted to the Town of Waterford's Planning Department website. To ensure good sound quality, the default rule for this meeting is that everyone will remain on mute unless they are speaking. If an attendee creates an audio or visual disruption, the Zoom moderator may place them on mute or remove them from the meeting if the disruption continues. We will not use the chat feature in this meeting. Tonight's continuation of the public hearing will begin with a presentation from the applicant, followed by comments from the Commission's third-party review consultant and comments from staff. The Commission members will have the opportunity to ask questions about the application and exhibits. The chair will then request public comments. When the chair announces the public comment period tonight, you may give your comments in the following manner. Use the raise hand feature in Zoom and wait to be called on. Before the hearing closes, we will ask for any new comments from people who are only able to join by phone or who are unable to use the raise hand feature. If multiple people attempt to speak at once, staff will help to moderate. The chair will announce when we are approaching the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Should the Commission continue the public hearing, the date of the next meeting will be announced before the Commission adjourns tonight. Please note that comments may also be received by the Commission via email or in writing anytime before the public hearing closes. We appreciate your attendance at this meeting. Should you have any questions about the process, you may call our staff at 860-444-5813 between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. As the meeting progresses, folks, we'd also like to remind you to state your name, address, and if you are with a company or on the applicant or peer review team, that we make sure that you state that for the record as well, so everyone listening knows who is speaking. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to our chair.
All right, we'll now open the meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Waterford on this day, October 19th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Karen Barnett, I would like to seat you for Joe DeBono.
Oh, I'm here, guys.
Okay, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Okay, item number 2 would be approval of the September 28th, 2020 meeting minutes.
I'll move approval. This is John Bashaw. I'll move approval of the September 28, 2020 meeting minutes.
Do I have a second, please?
Second, Greg.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I wasn't there, so I'm abstaining.
Aye.
All right, Karen. So we got Karen and John. Tim?
And I was not at that meeting.
All right, Greg. Greg Massey?
Yes. I didn't say yes.
Okay, and I'm in favor, so that's so moved. And also the approval of the October 6th, 2020 special meeting minutes.
I'll move approval of the October 6, 2020 special meeting minutes. It's John Bashaw.
And I'll second that. This is Tim Bleasdale.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor? John?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Karen? Oh, Karen's not unseated. Greg?
Yes.
And Joe, you were not
I
there.
wasn't there.
All right, and I vote in favor, so that's motion approved. Item number 3, receipt of applications, PL-20-24, request of Halifax Development LLC applicant to amend the zoning regulation, section 8A.2.5 by deleting the following: excluding drive-up windows or counter service. Public hearing required by 12/23/20.
This is a application for regulation amendment for the SDD zone district. This is the zone district for Waterford Commons. Commissioner recalls there was a pre-application presentation a few weeks back in which they were pretty much gauging the commission's thoughts on removing the restriction on drive-throughs for restaurants within that zone district. So right now, they have the application now in front of us, received tonight, and public hearing scheduled for November 9th.
Thank you. PL-20-26, request of St. Paul Catholic Church Corporation, owner and applicant for a 2-lot re-subdivision for property located at 170 Road Ferry Road, R40 zone, and as shown on plans titled re-subdivision property belonging to St. Paul's Catholic Church Corporation, revised through September 29th, 2020, and a public hearing required by 12/23/20.
This application is well being received tonight. Public hearing will be required. We haven't scheduled it yet, but it will be scheduled within the statutory timeframe.
Thank you, Mark. Item number 4, continued public hearing, PL-20-16, request of Fabcon Precast applicant Nathan Fund 1 LLC, owner of special permit and site plan approval to construct a concrete product manufacturing facility on property located at 140 Waterford Parkway South, IP1 zone, in accordance with sections 13, 22, and 23 of the zoning regulations as shown on plans entitled Inland Wetlands Special Permit and Site Plan Application for concrete manufacturing plant dated July 17, 2020. Public hearing must close by November 9, 2020.
We have a list of exhibits to enter in. I will read off the list of exhibits that we've received since the October 6th meeting. Exhibit 47, email correspondence from Victor Ferry to Abby Pearsall, dated October 7th, 2020. Exhibit 48, crossroad rehabilitation plans. Exhibit 49, email correspondence from Victor Ferry regarding communication from Fabcon CFO. Exhibit 50, email correspondence from Thomas Shack plus attachment, the 2016 PCI Sustainable Plant Performance Report. Exhibit 51, inter-office correspondence from Mark Wojtiewiak regarding zoning and development history, former Waterford Airport property and vicinity. Exhibit 52, Beechwood Estates Special Permit Findings Review, dated September 28, 1998. Exhibit 53, Traffic Impact Study for the Bridges Assisted Living Project, Beechwood Estate, prepared by Barkin and Mess Associates, dated June 3rd, 1998. Exhibit 54, letter dated October 16, 2020 to the Planning and Zoning Commission from the Beechwood Estates Executive Board of Directors. Exhibit 55, email correspondence dated October 16, 2020 from Fabcon CFO Mark Peterson to Victor Ferry. Exhibit 56, certified copy of the zoning regulations effective through September 9, 2020. Exhibit 57, certified copy of the 2012 Plan of Preservation, Conservation, and Development. Exhibit 58, overall site layout revised to 10/16/20, 6 pages. Exhibit 59, grading and drainage plan revised to 10/16/20, 6 pages. Exhibit 60, stormwater management plan revised to 10/16/20, 3 pages. Exhibit 61, letter dated October 16, 2020 to Waterford Department of Planning and Development from Seamus Moran, PE, Florio Engineering Associates, regarding the application PL 20-26, Site plan special permit, proposed concrete products manufacturing facility, 140 Waterford Parkway South, Fuss and O'Neill review comments, 3 pages. Exhibit 62, stormwater narrative with appendices dated 10/16/20, 64 pages. Exhibit 63, vehicle tracking analysis dated 10/16/20, 1 page. Exhibit 64, environmental sound evaluation prepared by Kavanaugh Tochi dated October 16th, 2020. Exhibit 65, FabCon site section. Exhibit 66, plan showing distance from project to surrounding properties. Exhibit 67, Town of Waterford noise ordinance. Exhibit 68, memo dated October 19, 2020 to the Planning and Zoning Commission from Mark Bretevius, titled Staff Response to Comments from Wario Engineering dated October 5th, 2020. Exhibit 69, memo dated October 19, 2020 to the Planning and Zoning Commission from Abby Pearsall, titled Additional Comments Regarding Application PL 2016-140 Waterford Parkway South, FabCon precast.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, at this point, we'd ask the applicant to come and any additional changes to your plan. We'd like to hear them now.
Sure. Thank you for having us again. My name is Seamus Moran, PE in Connecticut, I work for Loureiro Engineering. I'm joined by Clint Brown, also from Loureiro, and Cindy Reynolds from CR3 Studios at Loureiro, who's a subsidiary of Loureiro. They're a landscape architecture division. Also joined by Jeff Prince of Dacon Corporation, Doug Bell from Kavanaugh Tochi, I believe is what it is, who prepared the acoustic study, and Kermit Hua from KWH Enterprise, who prepared the traffic impact study. Last and certainly not least, Mark Peterson and Don Smith are also on the line, I see, and they are representatives of FabCon. Mark, thank you for reading those into the record. I guess actually, I emailed Abby a presentation a little while ago. I'm not sure. Were you able to download that, Abby?
Yep, we can put that up right now.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
I believe this is.
Just as while Abby's bringing this up, as a matter of some housekeeping, we just had the design review board meeting at 4 o'clock this evening. We received a unanimous approval from them. The Conservation Commission approved the draft motion for approval on October 8th. So we do have approvals from the Conservation Commission as of October 8th and the Design Review Board as of 2.5 hours ago. So, all right, perfect. Thank you, Abby. So again, we are here for our project is located at 140 Waterford Parkway South. It's next to the Coca-Cola facility. Next slide, please, Abby. This is just an outline of what we're presenting today. We're going to have a very brief summary from me, just reintroducing the project so you're familiar with it again. Then we'll get into the acoustic study that Doug Bell prepared, the traffic impact study that Kermit prepared, landscaping, Cindy will get into a little bit more a little bit later. Jeff Prince has prepared a siting arrangement, a couple of documents, and then Clint Brown will close us out our portion of the presentation with consistency with the zoning regulations. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Just very quickly, this is the former site of the Waterford Airport. It was in operation until '87. It was previously approved as a 25-lot commercial subdivision. We're in the IP1 zone. We're 189 acres. We're proposing to redevelop about 42 of those acres, equivalent to about 22% of the entire parcel area. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned, 42 acres. The building will be about 130,000 square foot of gross floor area. We're set back as proposed almost 500 feet, 492 feet from the front property line, which is fairly significant. So we are set back and down in kind of a hole from Waterford Parkway South. There is proposed over on a building expansion that is not proposed right this minute, but it might be in the future, and we wanted to account for that. So that is about 152 feet from the property line. Storage yard to the rear of the building is 18 acres. We have a proposed paved drive and a 60 parking space parking lot. There is water in Waterford Parkway South that we'll be connecting into. There's gas also in Waterford Parkway South that will extend down the road. There's existing sanitary sewer on the property and also on-site power that will connect it as well. Lastly, stormwater management. We've designed to reduce the peak rates and the volumes of the 2 through the 100-year storms, and we're infiltrating the 10-year storm event with the use of 5 infiltration basins and 4 subsurface infiltration systems. Continue, please. Again, it's just as a refresher, this is the overall proposed site development plan. You can see the building in kind of the northern section of the site, the storage yard to the rear, and you can see some the 5 storage basins are located, 2 in the upper quadrant, 1 in the middle left. Thank you, and then 1 in each of the bottom quadrants. Thank you. So that's the overall site layout. Next slide, please. So now, if Doug is with us, he will present the acoustic study, and that'll be followed by Kermit. So if you're there, Doug, would you mind please taking it away for me?
Okay. I understand you have a copy of our report that you can put up. Is that correct? Exhibit 64. Thank you. My name is Douglas Bell. I'm the president of Kavanaugh Tachi Associates. Kavanaugh Tachi Associates is located in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Has been in business since 1975. We do a large amount of this type of environmental sound work and environmental sound evaluations. Scope of our work for this, and I'm going to briefly review this, the scope of our study and our findings. Feel free, I guess, to ask questions as we go along the way. You're most welcome to do that. And Abby, I believe, are going to be controlling the page turn here?
Correct. Just tell me when you'd like me to turn and I'll go from there.
Okay, great. So our evaluation began with a survey of environmental sound in the project area. If you could switch to page 8 of that document. It'll be actual page 8, yeah, of the figure, which is figure 1, yeah. Oh, back, yep. We placed environmental sound monitors at 3 locations on the site to gather and record environmental sound levels over the period of a week. The intent here was to try to document background sound levels up at the Devonshire neighborhood property area, and then also to estimate background sound levels at other areas, the residences to the west. The dominant sound, as you can imagine, in this environment turned out to be noise from traffic on 395 or 95. Background sound levels dropped typically during the nighttime hours. If you move to figure 3, please. This would be the results of the sound monitor data over the course of a week, a typical pattern showing in there where background sound levels dip late at night mostly. There is, in this time period, it was in August, there was some insect noise that would come up sometimes in the nighttime periods. But for the most part, background sound levels follow a typical diurnal pattern of highest during the day and lowest during the night. Background sound levels at the 2 closest measurement locations range somewhere between 43 and 58 decibels. And a little further back at the Devonshire property at the south border, between about 38 and 54 dB. The purpose of this type of monitoring is to get some idea of what the existing backgrounds are in order to kind of place how facility sounds and put them in perspective to what the facility sound levels are. It's not necessarily in terms of necessary, but it gives us a much better feel for how things go. If you could go to page 2 of the report, we did a survey of regulations. The most appropriate and applicable noise regulations are associated with the Town of Waterford Noise Ordinance and the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection policy or regulation. To be honest, they're very similar in structure. The Connecticut State regulation was developed, and then most of the towns in the areas have adopted it with some small modifications. Typical of all of these Connecticut noise regulations, the limits are established at the property line of receptors, and they're based on a combination of the class or classification of the emitter and the classification of the receptor. And for this particular project, the emitter class is an industrial class, so the source, the FabCon facility would be an industrial source, so they would be classified as emitter C. And then the receptors, obviously the more sensitive receptors, the ones that are the residential properties, they would be considered class A. If you follow this chart here, you'll see that the limits during the daytime hours, those are for residential receptors vary. 61 decibels is the limit for daytime impacts from an industrial emitter, and 51 dBA for the nighttime implication. And night, I believe, is defined as 7 to 9 typically for Waterford. It's 7 to 10 for the state of Connecticut, but the Waterford one, obviously being more stringent, is the more applicable one in this particular case. If we move to page 3, please. The regulation allows for some variation above the limits for transient sounds that occur for short periods of time, and which allows you to potentially extend the limits. For example, if your sound level if sound occurred above the limit for less than 7.5 minutes in a particular hour, then the limits would be increased by 6 decibels, potentially raising the residential receptor property line limits from 51 to 57 at night and from 61 to 67 during the day. A few other definitions here and some important exemptions and exclusions that are found in both of the regulations is that noise produced by backup alarms required by OSHA or other state and federal safety regulations are exempted. Sounds created by mobile sources of noise. Mobile sources of noise shall include, but are not limited to, such as aircraft, automobiles, trucks, and boats. This exclusion, however, ceases to apply when a mobile source of noise has maneuvered into position at the loading dock or similar facility and has begun the physical process of loading or removing the contents of the vehicle. We'll come back to this discussion when we talk about some of the transient noise sources associated with this project. Also, noises created by emergency generators when in use for emergency purposes are also excluded. All right, can we turn the page again, please? So having that in mind, we then we created an acoustic model of the facility to predict or estimate sounds produced by the facility and then calculate what those estimates would be out at various receptor properties. We can extend that anywhere on the map. We broke down noise sources in this evaluation into those which are stationary sound sources and those which were mobile sound sources. The stationary sound sources are not necessarily associated just with stationary elements, but they occur only at one location. And for this particular evaluation, most of them are associated with the building itself and the manufacturing process. We received or got sound data from the vendors of the equipment that's proposed currently for this facility, along with visiting an existing FabCon facility out in Pennsylvania, in Mahanoy City, Pennsylvania. So we could observe operations, understand a lot of the processes as well, so that we had a better understanding for our modeling. Essentially, there was multiple sources: 11 exhaust fans, 7 makeup air units, roof air handling units, compressor rooms, air-cooled chillers, boilers, etc. All of these were implemented as sources with source emission characteristics into the model. All of those that I just listed would be considered day or night operations. They occur all the time. However, there were 2 other noise sources that we identified that were specific to daytime activities. One was the delivery of gravel to the facility, which is via truck, occurs approximately 4 times a day, and involves dumping the gravel material into a screening system, which vibrates, and then the material is then transported via conveyor into building silos for use. And then cement deliveries, and cement would be delivered again by truck once per day. The unloading process of this is typically a 45-minute process and involves the sound source associated with that really is associated with a truck mounted blower that removes the cement material from the powders from the material and loads it into a silo on site. Those would be the daytime activities. All right, if you would move to figure 5, I believe, we can start to look at this model and the results of that. And if possible, is there any chance you can zoom in on the plant site by? That's perfect. Right there is pretty good. So this is a model that we've overlaid onto an aerial photograph. The X's there represent various point sources. Each one of those X's is one of the sources that I discussed. There's sources that aren't showing up in this particular application, but down at the north point of the site of the building is where that vibratory or where the gravel unloading occurs. All right, we can zoom back out and we can look at the results of these calculations. We've picked 5 receptor locations to document here. And what these do is you'll see with each one is if we look at the top of the figure, there's something that's a receptor R-N, that would be residential or potentially a residential receptor on the north side. The daytime estimate's 45, the nighttime estimate was 27. And as you walk your way around the site, you can see that typically north, south, and west of the site, or east of the site, the levels, the daytime levels are in the low to mid 40s, and the nighttime levels are in the 27 to 28 dBA range. These are significantly below the required levels of the noise ordinance. When we get to the west side of the site, the levels drop even further for 2 reasons. One is that the 2 largest sources are daytime sources where those gravel deliveries and cement unloading, and those occur on the east side of the building and so are shielded to the west side. Obviously, the sound levels at the coke plant are a little bit higher, but again, well within the regulations. I did not mention earlier, but the regulation limits for commercial receptor properties would be 65, and for a receptor that was industrial, and I'm not sure the classification of the coke plant, whether it would be commercial or industrial, but it's 65 or 70. Kind of a moot point since the levels predicted there are between 37 and 34. So what we see here is that very clearly the steady state and day-to-day operations of the plant are going to be well within, are expected to be well within the regulations. And they also fall within what we found to be the lowest levels even measured during the surveys, which suggests that for the most part, these activities would be very consistent, if not even inaudible, with the existing, at these residential receptor locations. All right, if we could flip back now to page page 5 of the report, please. And we'll look at this section here of the bottom half of this page. That's great. The activities, mobile sources, sound sources, as I said, for the most part are excluded from the regulations, but still are obviously sources of noise that need to be considered when evaluating this site. Obviously, we have neighbors, and the potential for nuisance would exist, and we want to make sure that does not happen with this development. The mobile sources that were considered and were evaluated here were associated with what we would consider building to yard transfers or typical on-site processes. That typically means moving panels from the manufacturing building out to a storage area, a storage yard, which is in the south portion of the site. And then also yard pickups, which essentially is associated with over-the-road trucks coming to the site and picking up panels to deliver to construction sites. We spent a lot of time with the team here working on ways to make sure that these activities would have the least amount of sound impact at the nearest residences. And for the most part, the area that's of greatest concern, which is closest, would be that at the south property border. the distances to the east and west are significantly greater, and obviously the impacts there will be less than those at the nearest, when activities occur nearest to the south property border. So for the first things that have been developed here is things that have will be used as part of this project. The team is willing to has agreed to is that the gantry cranes that will be used on site would be low noise gantry cranes with fully enclosed engine compartments. These are small engines that drive these units, and the engine would then be completely packaged with doors on it, so that it, again, sound emissions from the exhaust and from the diesel engine in them would be low. And probably more importantly, and this really is the case, is that this device would be equipped with white noise motion alarms. These are very different than the traditional beep beep type backup alarms that you're all familiar with, that can be heard at great distances and typically create a lot of nuisance. These backup alarms are fully OSHA compatible, meet the regulations, but emit a sound which is very much similar to a shh, shh, shh sound. The beauty of that is it can be heard when you're in close proximity, but that sound dissipates very quickly in the open environment, and so that they become inaudible or tend to blend very quickly with background sounds. I have been involved with environmental noise for more than 30 years now, and the development of these white noise motion alarms has been one of the most important things to controlling noise, particularly when we have long-term construction projects where, again, we have construction equipment or moving vehicles in proximity to sensitive receptors. The second thing that's being considered at this site is a potentially temporary lack of not using or potentially not using the area of the storage yard within 500 feet of the south property. In the event that they would enter that area, then they would use electric powered yard trucks. Again, a very quiet device relative to the standard diesel yard hog. So these again would be equipped with white noise backup alarms. They can be, because again, they're controlled by the site, they're owned by the team. And so they would be, again, equipped with these white noise backup alarms. There's no activity would ever occur within 100 feet of the property line. And there would be no activity which would ever occur within 200 feet of the south residential property border. And if you flick back to the figure 5, I believe it is, we have highlighted these kind of zones. And we can zoom in now in that area of Devonshire, please. That's perfect. So the red line highlights an area that's essentially 200 feet from property borders of the residential receptors. The first 100 feet of that zone would never be used, and the second 100 feet would never be used at nighttime, and also would be used for storage of seldom used elements, braces, things that are not part of the that would require regular pickup. So that there would be rare activity in this, and it would only be during the daytime hours. And then the yellow line indicates a boundary at which the yard trucks that would enter that area would only be of an electric type drive, so that they would be a significantly quieter yard vehicle. And again, always with white noise. And finally, I want to highlight that there's a loop road here. There is anticipation that over-the-road trucks during the daytime hours would potentially come on site to pick up product. They would sometimes pick it up at the north end of the site where pre-loaded trailers existed, but there is the potential that those trucks might enter this site and travel through it. To prevent activating their backup alarms, this loop road has been designed such that it's a one-way traffic. Traffic would enter in one direction, would loop around. And to me, again, that's one of the most biggest issues. The loop road is 200 feet from the border, so the trucks that would be moving out there, again, unregulated by the noise regulation, but at least they still make noise. They would be kept a significant distance from the property line, traveling at low speeds, and would not be engaging backup alarms. With these controls in place, we actually believe that the sounds, even the temporary sounds that would be produced by the vehicles would fall within the range of the regulations, if not below them, and would comply even though that they are not explicitly required to do that. So that concludes my presentation as to the findings that we have here. As I said, we believe that we can fully comply with the regulations and have implemented a lot of very solid and really good pragmatic solutions to preventing off-site noise emissions from activity from mobile sources as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Now, just continuing on, if you move to the end of his report, Abby, it'll start Kermit's presentation. Yeah, actually one slide up. So now Kermit, who's our traffic engineer, will discuss his methodology, his traffic impact study. And Kermit, please take it away.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Kermit Hua. I'm a traffic engineer at KWH Enterprise LLC in Meriden, Connecticut. I'm a registered professional engineer in Connecticut with over 23 years of experience in traffic engineering. So there have been several submissions, the traffic study and the follow-up traffic letter in response to police chief's comments. The overall scope and method used for those traffic submissions are the Waterford land use regulation and engineering industry standard practices. So these are all general practices in the industry. Just very quickly go over the findings of the traffic study. We're looking at 71 trips during the weekday morning peak hour and 84 trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour. So those trips are the total of in and out trips. In other words, if a car comes in and leave the site, that will be 2 trips. So we're looking at 71 for the morning peak hour and 84 for the afternoon peak hour, not a significant amount. And the findings, I did a traffic analysis using data from Connecticut DOT for the 2020 condition because of the ongoing pandemic. It's not realistic to actually go there and count the traffic volumes, which are much lower than normal conditions. So I use DOT data for the 2020 condition. And for the 2022 build condition, I assume the 1% growth for each year. In other words, 2% over 2 years based on these existing volumes. The finding is there will be some traffic impact, but overall will be very limited. I looked at mainly 3 intersections. Obviously, the driveway intersection on Parkway South, and also the intersection of Crossroad with Parkway North, and the intersection of Crossroad with Parkway South. No issues with the driveway intersections on Parkway South. We are looking at level of service A for both peak hours. Also, no issues for the intersection of Crossroad and Parkway South. For the intersection of Crossroad and Parkway North, we do have one approach, the southbound approach of Crossroad at the Parkway North intersection that will have a level of services E and F, under no build and build conditions. This is mainly because of because we consider that the town's ongoing project to improve Crossroad north of Parkway North. Just briefly, I think the intention of that improvement project is to remove one northbound lane and one southbound lane on Crossroad to replace those 2 lanes with bicycle lanes and a separation width between the vehicular lanes and the bicycle lane. So because of that, we are reducing essentially southbound capacity on Crossroad by half. And that resulted in the background level of service E and the build level of service F for this intersection. Also, I looked at the accident records for area intersections, both for Waterford Parkway South and for Crossroad. For Waterford Parkway South, there were very few accidents were recorded during a 3-year period between 2017 and 2019. If you look at a section of Waterford Parkway South, east of the Crossroad intersection, there were only 3 accidents, from that intersection all the way to the dead end of Parkway South. So no abnormal accident patterns that we can identify from this exercise. Fusson O'Neill, the town's review engineer, has reviewed some of our traffic submissions. Generally, they indicated they agree with our methodology and findings. There were some comments during the last iteration, and we have responded to those comments and provided additional information. And I look forward to additional feedback from the review engineer. We definitely will respond to those additional comments if there are any before the November 9th hearing next month. So one thing I want to emphasize again, limited traffic impact, even though we are looking at some level of service E and F for the southbound approach of Crossroad at a Parkway North intersection in the afternoon peak hour, that's mainly because of the, the background condition of the town's project to improve Crossroad, not mainly contributed by this FabCon application. And also, we received through town a comment letter from residents at the Beechwood development. I will just respond to that, quickly. There were a lot of comments about the condition of Parkway South, pedestrian safety, vehicle turnaround, pavement conditions. My thought on this is that this is a town road, and the applicant is in no position to make additional changes to this town road. And just like the residents at Beechwood, we are entitled to use this road for access. So that's all I have to say about the conditions of the road itself. And also, the letter mentioned the deficient sidelines at the Beechwood development driveway on Parkway South. I actually looked at the traffic report prepared by the traffic consultant for that development. That report was dated May 18, 1998 by Barkin and Mass Associates, Inc. On page 8 of that report, I quote, the preparer concluded the sidelines at the driveway intersection on Parkway South meet Connecticut Department of Transportation guidelines. So I'm sort of confused. The letter seems to contradict the owner's own traffic consultant's conclusion when that project was designed. So, but regardless, I think, if there's any deficient sideline conditions at their driveway, I don't think the applicant FabCon is in any responsibility to correct that conditions. They should talk to the developers or the engineer of this project. Also, the topic of emergency vehicle access was touched on in the review in a comment letter from Beechwood. As you know, the site engineer for FabCon, they spend a lot of time using order terms to demonstrate to the towns that large tractor trailers will have no problem access the site. As you know, those tractor trailers are much larger than your typical emergency vehicles, whether medical or fire trucks. So if we can allow large tractor trailers to access the site and use Parkway South, we don't see there's any problem for emergency vehicle access. Mr. Chair, that's all I have for now. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Kermit. So the next maybe 30 some odd pages are actually his report. I wasn't sure if you wanted to reference that. So you can skip all the way to the bottom of this. And I think Cindy might take over some of the landscaping to discuss some of that. I know that was a discussion. The lighting and landscaping was a discussion last meeting, so we just wanted to touch back on that. So Cindy, if you're there, if you wouldn't mind taking this one over.
Not a
great.
problem. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being with us this evening. As Seamus mentioned, my name is Cindy Reynolds. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I work at Lorero. We've had the pleasure of working with Seamus and the team on the FAPCOM project. For the site lighting, as some of you have already heard and some may not, there's three different lighting aspects that we are working with. There's lighting on the building itself, there is lighting on the drives and parking, and then there is lighting in the storage area. In all cases, we had kind of two goals in mind. We wanted to, one, allow for safe and effective operation of the facility, of course, but we also wanted to be sensitive to the neighbors and make sure that light was not spilling off site if we could prevent it in any way. So we did a couple of things to make sure that the impact of the light would be minimized as much as possible. The first was that we're using 3000 Kelvin light fixtures, which is as dim as possible. So it's a soft light. So it will throw enough light to be effective without being that bright blue that really is jarring in the evenings, especially. We are using dark sky compliant fixtures, and we are also selecting fixtures which the lamps can be directed so that we can avoid backspill. So lights which are along the back of the property and lights which are along the edges can be directed inward without having overflow going behind the pole. So that's the general notion for the lighting. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm trying to keep it a little bit brief, but if anyone wants more information, I'd be happy to provide that. I guess the only other aspect of it, you might be wondering about the pole heights. The pole heights for the drive and parking area will be 25 feet. We use that height to accommodate the large vehicles which will be moving through here, and also to minimize how many poles we needed to install. In the storage area, the poles will be 40 feet high. We need that height in order to avoid the gantry cranes, which are quite tall, and so that the light fixtures are not being knocked off the top. They need to be higher. So that's the quick and dirty summary of lighting. Are there any questions on that before I move on to the landscaping plan? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much. So for the landscaping, we had, again, two kind of core goals to the landscaping plan. One was that we wanted to maintain as much of the existing as possible. An entire half of the site is being left untouched, which is fantastic. And so we wanted to kind of carry that theme of leaving the existing and supporting the natural environment. So along with maintaining the existing, we wanted the things that we put in to work with the local ecosystems. So using native materials and working with a more naturalized planting theme. So instead of having manicured lawns, we're going to be replanting disturbed areas with native wildflower and grass mixtures, so that it will establish a natural ecosystem, which will be low maintenance. There will not be a lot of mowing required, without a lot of chemicals, not a lot of fertilizers. It should be fairly minimal maintenance, which is good for everybody. Specific to the neighbors, we wanted to be respectful of the town's regulations, and by doing so, be as respectful of the neighbors. So for the IP1 zone, the town regulations require that a buffer strip of at least 40 feet wide shall be left naturally wooded or planted with not less than 2 rows of evergreen trees or landscaped in some other approved fashion. So what we took away from that is basically you need to provide the complete visual screen and do it in a way that's going to actually be effective. And while we we appreciated the notion of having the 2 rows of evergreens as a solid option. It tends to create a almost green Band-Aid effect, which we didn't felt that met with our goal of having a naturalized environment. So what we looked to do was double the width of the buffer. So for 100 feet, we're not removing existing material. Within that same area, instead of just lining it with evergreens, we're interplanting the existing trees with new material, primarily evergreen with some deciduous as well. And we're focusing that material on the areas that will be most impactful for the residences for screening their views of the new site. So we can move to is the landscape plan on the next slide again? Yes, excellent. So you can see up by Waterford Parkway South, we're providing this naturalized buffer. The existing plants are not shown on there, but what we did, because woodlands are not typically surveyed with individual trees, but we took an aerial image, a high resolution aerial, and we kind of, using that we place the trees about where they would go in reality, but there's going to be a lot of field locating because we want to interplant. So you'll see that scattered effect. We are doing layers. It's more than 2 deep, so that it will have the strongest impact possible for creating a complete visual screen. And if we can scroll down so that we can see the southern border, please. Thank you. You'll see a similar situation between the residential properties and the stockyard area, where we have this scattered of a variety of species that will be interplanted with the existing. You'll also notice along the edges, the perimeter of the disturbed area, there is a hatch, which would be the wildflower seeds that would be scattered and establish native meadow habitat. The water treatment, the stormwater treatment basins would have a similar seed mix, which would be supplemented with a variety of native milkweed plants. So that would provide some great habitat creation opportunities. And we have provided some shrubs and trees of various species and sizes to supplement the biodiversity of the area. So there's a wide variety provided here, and also to help cool the water runoff so that when the water comes out of the basins, when it comes out of the swales, it's as close to kind of what the rainwater temperature would be as we can make it. I think that's, again, the quick and dirty summary of the planting. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Cindy. So actually, if you want to skip down, I think there's maybe the next 3 slides or blow-ups of the landscaping. We can come back to these if there's any questions or you're looking for more detail. Then I think Jeff Prince is going to jump in and talk about kind of our siting arrangement. So Jeff, if you want to mind stepping in.
Thank you, Seamus. My name is Jeff Prince. I work for Dacon Corporation, and we are doing the design and the construction of the facility for FabCon. Is the next slide a photograph of the site? It is. Can we see the extent of this photograph? So I wanted to go back and look at a few of the things that we've talked about at a higher level. First off, the black outline that you see is the outline of a 188-acre property. The white box in the middle is about the limit of where we're doing site improvements. So then I wanted to show some distances to the building and to the nearest residential areas. So the first thing to realize is that in the center, there is a white box with a 63 in it, and that is the location of the building. And the elevation of the ground is at elevation 63. That southern tip of that building is 1,250 feet to the nearest residence at Devonshire. Also, the nearest portion of the building to the west going over to Beechwood Estates is 1,960 feet. And about halfway in between is where the Coke property is. I also wanted to give an indication of how far apart the driveways are between Beechwood Drive and the entry to the FabCon site, which is about a half a mile, 2,650 feet. A few things to notice is the proximity of the property to the Beechwood Estates. The corner of the property is 350 feet away to the nearest Beechwood Estate residence. However, the whole western half of our site will not be developed. That's the whole western half of Jordan Brook. Something else to notice is the elevation difference between the site and Beechwood Estates. If I was to go from the elevation 63, which is the floor elevation of FabCon, and go westerly to the Coca-Cola plant where the floor elevation is about 80, and then I could move westerly even yet again, there's a big ridge, there's a big hill. And the top of that hill is about 200 or about 140 feet above FabCon, and then it drops. And it drops about 40 or 50 feet, depending on where you are. The assisted living complex on the west is lower than the houses in the middle of the development. But you can see that there is a pretty big drop of about 40 feet between the ridge at the corners of the properties and the actual residential development to the west. So again, there's a half mile between the roadways. There's a third of a mile between the buildings. And there's very little site development taking place on the western side of the site. You might notice, or you might be able to see that there is a marker for a section that shows right to the left of the 95 marker. There's a site arrow. And that shows what happens if we would to chop the site vertically right through that section. We could see what we're going to see on the next page. Could you go to the next exhibit, please, Abby? This is going to be a little bit difficult to read, but the first thing I want to do is to focus on the right side of this document, just so I can show what its contents are. But what we have on the right side is a section through Waterford Parkway. There's a fence shown and some landscaping shown in the first 150 feet of yard. To the right of that is the highway, both I-95 northbound and southbound. And what we're showing here in fairly simple terms is that if you assume your eye level is at 5 feet and you're on Waterford Parkway South and you have a 6-foot fence and a bunch of landscaping in front of you, you can't see the building. So if we scroll down to the bottom of this same sheet, please, Abby. Maybe we scroll into Waterford Parkway South just to see what we're looking at here. Thank you. And you can see an automobile, and you can see a person, and you can see a fence and some landscaping behind the fence. But what we're trying to show is that try as hard as you can't see the building from that point. So Waterford Parkway, you cannot see the facility because it is too far away or it is behind the fence. The same thing applies to the highway. The highway will have nothing but a very fleeting glimpse if there's a hole in the landscaping, which I don't foresee. And you will not be able to see through to see any significant elevation of the project from Waterford Parkway to the facility. So this was done in response to many fine questions from the commission, where there was a question asked, can we provide a rendering from the highway? The response has to be that because we provided screening in conformance with the zoning, that we cannot see the building from the road. The building will be not visible from Waterford Parkway South. And it may be visible for a second and a half on the highway, but it depends, where exactly you are and whether or not you have that opportunity to look through the landscaping. But the purpose of this is to make sure that we are properly considering the screening and the efforts that we're going through to install new screening, and the efforts that we've made to site the building so that it is not a visual disturbance to the surrounding neighborhood. I also do want to point out, if I could take the opportunity, that this building is not a residential building. It's not an office building. It is in fact a building built around very large machinery. And so it exhibits those properties and those shapes that are required for the manufacturing of a product, but it is a state-of-the-art concrete manufacturing facility. It will be one of the most advanced concrete plants in the country, and one that I'm sure that Waterford will be proud of. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I think we just have one more slide. If Clint's available, I think he could just kind of go over our consistency with the regulations and how and our special permit findings. So Clint, if you're available, would you mind taking it home for us? Clint, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I always forget to do that. Clint Brown with Lorero Engineers. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut. I'm also the staff planning professional at Lorero. Have about 40 years of experience in both civil engineering and land planning and working with zoning regulations. As part of our efforts here over the past several weeks, we've been building a record on which we hope you will base your decision. And we've been working closely with your staff, with the other agencies of the town of Waterford, and also with your peer reviewer to address comments and questions about the project and how it comes together. It's obviously an ambitious project, has a lot of facets, and we think that it, as Jeff said, it would be a credit to the town of Waterford. What we've tried to do is make sure that we link all the technical work that we've done to the findings that the commission will make as part of a special use permit. And those range from consistency with the plan of development to orderly development, compliance with zoning regulations, traffic circulation, adequacy of utilities. There are 12 or 13 specific criteria, and we did provide a statement into the record which addresses each one of those. And I think when you see that, you will recognize how it is linked back to one of the technical items that you've heard this evening. And most importantly, as you may recall, this project couldn't have gotten to where it is today without initiating changes to the zoning regulations, text amendments in the industrial park district. So that was done with a purpose in mind, certainly to make sure that if a project were brought forward at this location, that it would be, number one, compliant, and number two, considerate of the interests of neighboring properties. And I think the positioning of the building, the substantial setbacks, the very low coverage, the attention to architecture and landscaping all lead one to the frame of mind that there is a strong relationship between all of those elements and those criteria in your special permit regulations. So we hope that you will take the time to look at that. It's relatively brief. It's statement of findings, excuse me, but it's supported in every case by either documents that the town has put together over the years, POCD and an update and those kind of things, or by some of the technical studies that you've heard about over the past several weeks. So we think it's well supported, and look forward to your action on the application. Thank you very much.
Abby, and I'm sorry, and the commission, that concludes our presentation. Sorry if it went a little bit long. We thought we wanted to address a lot of items that we felt needed to be addressed and discussed, and now we're happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Any of the commissioners have any comments, questions at this time?
This is John Bashaw. I do have a number of
Greg,
questions.
do you have some questions?
All right, we'll go with John first, please.
Hi, John.
Okay, well, the first question, Joe, is just respected timing. I know the public was listening in last week or the last hearing, and I didn't know if you wanted to just take commission comments first and before doing to the public. I'm assuming that that's what you want to do.
Peer review comments and then.
Yeah, your comments, staff, is that what you said?
I think one of the recommendations is, while we have our peer review team here, is to have them make sure that they also have an opportunity to provide their analysis of any outstanding issues or questions related to the application. And then from there, the commission can decide how quickly to get to commission questions or public comment.
And does that answer your question, John?
It does, but it sounds like then maybe you want the third party comments at this point.
Yes, that'll be
Okay,
right.
that's fine.
So if our third party is available, would you please start?
Yeah, my name's Keith Gooder. I'm from Fuss and O'Neill. We were working with the town of Waterford as the third party review for the stormwater management system, the erosion control design, the Jordan Brook Watershed Management Plan compliance, and review of the traffic engineering. We submitted 11 pages of comments back in September 21st. We got comments back from Lurero, I believe it was 10/5/2020. And I would say the majority of the comments we had been addressed for the stormwater management system and the erosion control. There were a few relatively minor things that we would still like to see addressed. One of them being comment 21 about maintenance access to basins C2 and E2. Looks like some of one of the basins didn't have access, and one of the basins had an access drive that was on a relatively steep slope. So we would recommend that the Lurero take a second look at that and see if they can do anything about giving access to those two basins outside of a 3-to-1 slope. Comment 18, this still looks like there's a fire line in conflict with basin A2 and D. And I apologize, we had a comment letter ready to go out, and unfortunately we didn't make it. We missed one of our engineers who needed to sign it, had to leave. So all these things I'm going over will be put together in a comment letter that we will send you guys first thing in the morning. So I just want to make sure everything's clear. Another minor comment, there seemed to be a discrepancy between the flow out of basin E2. Again, I would just ask Lurero to take a second look at that and then confirm that one of the two numbers. And then I think the last minor comment is there's still no StormCAD model. It sounds like from the comments that a StormCAD model is forthcoming. And when that comes in, that it would be reviewed for compliance. I believe they're trying to convey the 10-year storm. So again, once that comes in, we can take a look at that. And then I think the major comment that we have is probably still outstanding is the infiltration rate used for the design. I know that one of their comments, their response was that the number they used was in the report that was done by Haley and Aldrich. I guess my concern is that the value that was used was probably a weighted average of all the basin or all the infiltration rates that was done and spread out over the basins uniformly. I guess the concern is that if you look at the table that's also in the Haley and Aldrich report, the values for the infiltration rate vary from essentially 0 to over 14 inches an hour. And there's just too much variability, I believe, to try and just take a uniform rate and apply it to all, I think there's 9 infiltration basins. Specifically, one comes to mind is, I think it's A1. It's sort of between 2 different basins. And if you look at the geotech report, it's sort of sandwiched between a rate that came in at 0 and a rate that came in at 14. So the concern is that with the infiltration being such an integral part of the stormwater design, to try and reduce volumes and retain the entire 10-year storm, that we want to have relatively good data for what we're going to model as an infiltration rate for all the basins. So what we're recommending is that each individual basin have an infiltration rate that's field tested just for the basin in that area, rather than try and take a generalization of an average infiltration rate over, you know, whatever it is. I think a 45 or 50 acre site that you're trying to average a number out, and then you use a specific rate for that specific basin. And it sounded like in some of the reports that that is probably ongoing or will be forthcoming. And so the recommendation I would have is that when those tests are done, that the model is updated accordingly with the newer, more accurate infiltration rates specific for the basin or each infiltration basin. So that was probably the biggest one. And then, you know, I would just like to add that one of our concerns was that the former use of the site was a landfill and an airport, and that there is potential for contaminated soils to be encountered on site. It looked like that there's already been some due diligence done by Lorero through Haley and Aldrich to take a look at that. And I think some of the recommendations came back that the soil is, I guess, relatively clean or doesn't need any further recommendations. But what we would say is they offered that there was going to be a third-party LEP on site, and we would recommend that that be done through Haley and Aldrich, that you have the third party on site during excavation and any like large earth moving material or earthwork activity. The other one that we want to add is that, again, because infiltration is such an integral part out here, and then what we're recommending is that the infiltration rate be tested annually and then built into the O&M plan for the stormwater management design. And again, it's just basically, I know there was some language added to the plans about if there's standing water after so many days, or if there's, you know, so many inches of sediment in the bottom that they're going to be regraded, and then new material is going to be put down. But again, the concern is that if you lose any of the infiltration rate that you're counting on for, you know, infiltrating a 10-year storm, that you could have failure in the stormwater management design. So what we're recommending is that just an annual test for each of the basins, that you can ensure that you have, you know, if your design rate in this case was out there, I think we're using 3.5 inches or 3.6 inches, that you still can maintain that every year. And then the last comment I had was just, I know we had a comment about the limit of disturbed area on site. And I know that the work areas have been divided into work area 1 and work area 2. And I believe work area 1 was 17 acres, work area 2 was 25 acres. Those are still relatively large areas to have open at one time during construction. So it's just a recommendation that the contractor be aware of opening or not opening as much as he doesn't have to minimize total disturbed area at any one time. And that if you can try and phase it out, the recommendation be phase it out to limit areas so that you don't have all 42 acres exposed at one time. And that was pretty much all I had for the stormwater management review.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna do questions now.
Mark, did you use for traffic?
What is it?
There's one more peer reviewer for traffic.
Okay. Do we have the traffic peer review?
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Mark Vertucci, Senior Traffic Engineer at Fuss and O'Neill. I'm also a registered professional engineer in Connecticut and a professional traffic operations engineer as well. We did take a look at the traffic study that was prepared by KWH, and we issued some comments, and they have addressed most of the comments here. I just wanted to go through briefly, and we took a look at those, and there's just a couple of outstanding items, so I'll go through it pretty quickly here. The traffic study in general, we agreed was completed in accordance with traffic engineering industry standards, and we did overall agree with the findings of the study that the development will not have a significant impact to traffic operations on the intersections that were studied in the vicinity of the site. We did ask that the updated synchro analysis be provided. That some of the capacity analysis was revised to incorporate the Crossroad project. So that analysis was submitted, and we did review it, and everything looks like it was done consistent with that project. We had a comment that a site distance analysis was not provided at the site driveway location. The applicant did respond there was greater than 500 feet of site distance looking left from the driveway for a design speed of 45 miles per hour. That site distance would be appropriate for a passenger car. However, for a WB65 design vehicle or a larger truck, the DOT would require 765 feet of site distance for that design speed. So I've just, and this will be in our comments that are coming out tomorrow, but I've just asked that the applicant verify that site distance can be provided, is provided, or if it's not, if it can be provided through clearing and trimming of vegetation in Parkway South. We asked what the largest design vehicle was that will access the site, and again, they indicated a WB65. I asked that an auto turn analysis be provided just to confirm that two large trucks could turn right in and left out of the driveway simultaneously without encroachment on the center lines of travel. And they indicated that the site was designed for that size truck, but we didn't see the auto turn analysis provided yet. They said that would be provided at a later date. So we would want to see that submitted just to confirm that it works. I had a comment about the the termination of Parkway South just beyond the site driveway location, and there's really no turnaround area if there's an errant vehicle that comes down there. So it was more of a comment for the applicant that if you get an errant vehicle, they're probably going to turn into the site driveway and turn around and potentially interfere with their site traffic operations. Now, I understand that I believe there's been an agreement with the town that the applicant will provide some right-of-way such that the town at a later date could potentially provide a cul-de-sac at the end of the road. And, that sounds like it would be a good solution to that potential issue. I had a comment on crash analysis. There were a number of collisions at the crossroad intersections that were identified in the state Yukon crash repository data, and that information was provided. My only comment on the information that was provided, I noted there were about 13 angled collisions on Crossroad in the vicinity of the Parkway North and South, and just just asked for more information on the nature of those collisions and if there were any, identifiable crash patterns in those accidents that were reported that might be of concern. Other than that, their traffic generation rates for the development were consistent with industry standard ITE rates. I know they use some operational data to determine their rates, but they followed closely with the industry standards, so we're comfortable with those. The traffic generation, I commented it, there might be a little bit low with the percentage coming from the north on Cross Road from 395. They only had 5% there, but as I look at the intersections on Cross Road, even if they added more traffic heading north there, it would not have a substantial impact of the findings of those analysis at the two intersections with Parkway North and South. So I'm comfortable with those results as well. And I believe that was everything. The only other thing I'll say is I did, Mr. Hua commented on the Beechwood issue there. And I also took a look at the Barkin and Mess study, and they mentioned there was 350 feet of sight distance coming out of that driveway. And, for the 45-mile-per-hour design speed, in current DOT standards would require 500 feet there. So it does appear it's pretty substandard. Nothing really to do with this applicant. It's not their responsibility, in my opinion, to correct that, but the data does support there's an issue there. And, I would say if there's anything that could be done by that developer or the town to potentially clear some vegetation on the south side of Parkway South there, might do something to mitigate that issue a bit. And I can take any questions if you have them, or we can move on.
All right, thank you. Any of the commissioners have any questions at this point?
This is John Bashaw. I've got a few questions. I guess maybe just since this is a segue, I'll ask Mr. Vertucci, since he just reported on the traffic. I think you probably heard Mr. Hua talk about this 1998 study that was done for Beechwood.
Yes, that's what I was just referring to.
All right. Now, at the time that study was done, do you know if that Coca-Cola plant the Coca-Cola plant did not exist at that time. I think it was built in 2010.
That's right. It was not there.
Okay. And then at the time, there also wasn't any industrial operations such as this going on down at the proposed location, correct? At the time of that 1998 study? Not
to my knowledge, no.
Did you find that study to be particularly helpful as far as the traffic analysis itself that's going on here?
That study is, it's a good 22 years old. I mean, as far as the volumes and the analysis, I mean, it's pretty dated information. The one thing I did find fairly valuable was the sight distance measurement there. And I thought it was a pretty marginal, even at the time, 350 feet, given the crest and the hill that exists to the east of that driveway.
Okay. I'm just going to kind of jump around, so I'll get through my questions. I guess for Mr. Brown, who was reporting on the compliance with the special zoning requirements, I think Mark and Abby both published memorandums dated today. And in Mark's memo, he makes comments regarding the submittal by the applicant on findings compliant with section 23.5 and finding that those the narrative that was submitted lacks the necessary detail to provide commission approval. I'm just wondering whether you've had a chance to look at that and whether you intend to supplement or respond to that comment. And Clint, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, Clint Brown again. I have not seen those comments yet. If as soon as I get them, I'll be happy to take a look at them. And if there's some additional information needed, I'll be more than happy to supply it.
Great, thank you. And I guess kind of a generic question for all. Both Mark and Abby raise a number of questions in those memos. And not that I'm looking for a specific response tonight on those, but I would assume that you all are going to be looking at those questions and responding accordingly, at least in the interim before our next hearing. The next question I have is, if I could go to the Jeff Prince, if I could go to that diagram that you were using to show the sight lines along the highway and show the individual standing next to the fence. I just want to look at something here. And actually, you don't need to zoom in. You can actually, if you zoom out, Abby, that would be great. So I'm trying to figure out from this diagram from 95 northbound, what, if anything, would be seen from 95 northbound of the building? Because the line doesn't extend that far out, the sight line.
The answer to your question is that they won't see any more or less than what you would see from Waterford Parkway, because their elevation is about the same. So
Okay.
a 5-foot eye level is a little bit higher than the eye level in an automobile, but essentially it's about the same, and they're not going to see more or less than what somebody on Waterford Parkway South would see.
All right, so if that's the case, and I don't know what exhibit number this is, I'm just going to hold it up to my camera. So it's this diagram that shows what it was going to look like from the highway.
That's correct.
Tower.
I
That
understand.
doesn't seem to be consistent with what you just said.
Okay, the diagram that you're looking at does not show the screening and landscaping in place.
But the screening and landscaping, if I went back to your design, is no higher. There, you'll see there's a tree in this. I don't know, it's hard to see. In this diagram, there's a tree right in the front, which I think is a tree that was right next to the person in your diagram. And I think the fence is not going to go much higher than that tree. I guess my only point is there just seems to be an inconsistency between the diagram that you provided tonight and this previous one that we have in the record. And I just,
The previous one was meant to be an explanation of the building view from the point at which the driveway goes from Waterford Parkway in, because that's right at the driveway.
okay.
So I'm looking right down that curb cut, Mr. Bashaw.
Yeah.
And I understand that there is some inconsistency because I was not able to take the photograph and add to it the height of the screening or the height of the other plantings that aren't there yet, such as 12-foot high spruce or maple trees or the other kinds of items that are shown in the landscaping plan.
Okay. My next,
But I do agree there's an inconsistency there. Thank you for pointing that out. I hope not to create confusion. I want to make sure that we're communicating properly.
I've got some questions now on the sound study. And I don't actually have the study itself in front of me. So I guess if you could, Abby, if you could go back and pull that up, that would be helpful.
Won't be in this document, Abby. It's, oh, it is. I'm sorry. It is there.
There we go. There it is. So, okay. So this is based upon modeling, and the inputs to the model, as I recall from this report, were vendor sound data and measurements that were taken at the Pennsylvania facility, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Could you provide, at some point, would you be able to provide the actual sound measurements at that Pennsylvania facility so we can actually look at the numbers?
They're quite complicated. There are some measurements of cranes measured, in activity that extend over minutes of time, and we extract different pieces of data from that. We can certainly provide the data that was input to the model in terms of the how we characterize those sources.
Well, let me go back. How many FabCon facilities are there? Do you know?
I do not know.
There's 5 nationally.
5 nationally. Okay. Any particular reason why the Pennsylvania plant was chosen for the data input for this model?
It was the most representative facility.
So it's the most similar to this one, Jeff?
Yes, except for that the operations at the Pennsylvania facility do include some exterior manufacturing operations, and this may be what Mr. Bell is referring to.
Well, it would be helpful to know what inputs are being actually put into the model, because the model is only as good as the data that's going into it. And it would be helpful to have that information if you could. With respect to the 5 facilities, other operating facilities, are there any known actual noise violations of applicable state or local standards, as far as anybody knows?
Could you repeat that question again, Mr. Bashaw?
Sure. With respect to the 5 FabCon facilities, I'd like to know if there have been any violations of applicable local or state noise standards.
I am not aware of any violations of any noise standards.
Okay, well, I will stop now. I'll let my fellow commissioners, so I don't want to hog all the time, so I'll let my fellow commissioners ask questions.
I might mention in response, Mr. Bashaw, that one of the facilities, particularly the facility in Minnesota, the yard operations are immediately adjacent to an elderly residence. And just should be noted that that doesn't have any active complaints.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Greg, did you have some comments?
Yes, I do. I had some of the same questions about the diagram, the highway view number 1. I think last meeting I called it a rendition. I meant a rendering. I think you knew what I meant, but I am really concerned that we don't have a rendering again at this meeting, a real architectural rendering from the highway, because I'm very concerned with what I see in terms of what was submitted in this highway view number 1 last meeting, and then what was indicated today. Can I ask a question? How wide is the curb cut now?
I can get that for you. Just one second.
And how wide are you requesting it to be?
we're not proposing to make any changes to the curb cut right now. It's what's there is what the existing condition is, what we're proposing right now. Let me
Okay,
find that.
and we know how wide that is?
I'm gonna find it for you right now.
Okay. I would note that as I drove down the street yesterday, I noticed that the buffer between the highway and Parkway South is the least dense of any part of the buffer, is right in front of this property. So when you look from the highway, you are definitely going to see whatever is there through this curb cut and into the property. And I have real issues with not being able to see what it's going to look like on its absolute best day. And from what I've seen from the other plants on Google Earth and what was submitted by the neighbors on other exhibits, very concerned that this is going to be something that we're not really interested in and doesn't fit into the neighborhood of this area. And I can't stress enough that a rendering is needed, an accurate architectural rendering of what we will see at this property.
Mr. Masad, if I could, I'll just jump in for a second to answer your first question. The existing entrance, where was that? It's the existing driveway width is 113 feet at the property line and 142 feet at the curb line.
Okay, so if you look at the width of the building, that is wider than most of the building. Some of the building gets as wide as just over 180 feet. But so we're going to see this whole building from the highway, because obviously the curb cut in the driveway is going to be at ground level and the building is going to be from there. I would think that this highway view number one is somewhat of an accurate portrayal. We just can't see exactly what we have except for a red box. So I'm going to again request a rendering of this for our next meeting. With respect to the sound study, these sounds at these other plants in especially Pennsylvania, they're taken at different feet from the property. Is that accurate?
Well, though, from the different sources, what we do is try to characterize and quantify the emissions from sources that we don't have specific vendor data for. Like with the fans, the people who manufacture the fans publish specific data. Typically, what we do is we'll measure them at a reasonable distance, far enough away that we're characterizing all of the emissions. And then we would then take that data and then normalize it to 50 feet. And then when we put it in the model, then it can be then produced from that. Sometimes instead we convert to what's called a power level, which is irrelevant or is irrespective of distance, but just characterizes the total sound emissions. But so what we're doing is this for sources that we felt we needed and wanted to have a better understanding of, and they were things like how much noise is made when you offload the cement, how much noise is made when the gravel is being dropped into the vibrating conveyor. Those kind of sources that are unique to this facility. We also wanted to measure the sounds from the current gantry cranes that are in use there at that site, as they would be, again, most similar to what would be proposed for this site.
But does it make a difference that the Pennsylvania site's heavily wooded, like almost right around the operations?
No, not at all. We're measuring the sound direct from the source. What's behind us has no effect on the propagation of it.
Okay.
Between us and the source.
Do we have that? Okay. Do we have that high resolution image that was being talked about? It was like a bird's eye high resolution image.
You mean that I mentioned for the conceptual placement of the plant material?
I think so, yes.
That is something that we don't have right now. Is it something you need to see?
Well, yeah, I am kind of concerned about the buffers and the plantings and the landscaping. So yeah, if you used a high resolution image, I'd like to see what you used.
I don't have that, ready for distribution at the moment, but we can look into that.
Okay. And so who did that?
The image or the placement?
The image.
We have a subscription to a company that makes flyovers of various areas to get high quality aerial imagery for purposes such as this for people in our field to use as a resource.
Do you know who it was?
Near map, sorry. The name of the company is
Okay.
Near Map.
Okay. Now these gantry cranes that you talked about, how many are going to be on the property, and what do they actually do?
There'll be 3 cranes in the rear yard operating at any one time. And what they actually do is they take panels off of trucks and put them on the ground, or the reverse. Take panels off the ground and put them under trucks.
Okay. Somebody mentioned storage trucks. Are those? Are there 18-wheeler trailers on the property?
Yes, there's vehicles on the property to pick up panels, and there's vehicles that go back and forth from the building to the yard to deliver finished product.
Okay, but are there trailers on the property that hook up to an 18-wheeler?
There could be 2 or 3 trailers stored next to the building for a specific order, but not on a regular basis. In other words, if there was a long haul driver that had to go a long distance, there might be a trailer stored with panels ready to go that a driver would pick up in the morning.
Okay, so if you look at the images of some of the other plants, they look like they could be trailer after trailer after trailer after trailer, and I might be seeing something different. They might not be trailers. What does anybody know what they are that's stored at these other facilities?
I think the images of the other facilities are not this facility. Okay, the other images deal with the character of the yard, but there's also outside storage and manufacturing operations that are occurring at other facilities that will not occur at this facility.
Okay. But at those other facilities, are those trailers?
I'm sure there are trailers at the other facilities.
Okay, but there's a lot of trailers, right? Is that fair? I'm just trying to figure out if that's what we see in these pictures. Because it was mentioned here tonight that you're planning an expansion in the front of the building, or possible expansion in the front of the building closer to the frontage road. And so it may not be happening now, but I'm not trying to figure out what the possible future expansion is if what's happening at these other plants is what's going to happen here. And are they trailer after trailer after trailer that I see in these photos?
I don't think that the expansion in the front will affect the number of trailers on the site.
Do you have any idea what the expansion could be?
Yes.
And what would that be?
320 foot by 40 foot extension of some rails to move a very large piece of equipment out of the building.
Okay, so those rails would be in between what's presently being proposed as the building and the road.
Yes. That space will exist either inside an enclosure or outside. On day one, it will not be inside a building, it will be outside.
Is there anything presently in operation that would show us what that might look like?
Nothing from a photographic standpoint. Essentially, it is a large flat object moving out of the building on a rail.
And how, what's the size of that again? From let's see, is it north to south?
The object they're moving out and the building enclosure are roughly the same size. So the object coming out is 14 foot wide by 300 foot long. The building would be 30 or 40 foot wide and 320 feet long.
So another 300 feet toward the highway?
Up to the setback line.
And what's the time frame for this proposed expansion or possible expansion?
Guessing 2 to 5 years.
Okay. That concerns me greatly, that we would approve a site plan with a known possible expansion of an additional 300 feet toward the road today, when that's going to happen in possibly 2 to 5 years without any renderings, no pictures, no descriptions, nothing to indicate what we're going to see from the highway or from frontage road.
None of this is visible from Waterford Parkway, Mr. Masad.
Okay, why is that?
Because the screening will have blocked the view.
Is the curb cut directly due north of the building?
No.
How far off of it is it?
It's probably, I'm guessing 70 to 100 feet.
I'll look that up for you, but in the meantime, Abby, would you mind pulling up the landscaping plan, just so we could just look at it, so we can see. Obviously, we design things planimetrically. That's what's, a rendering would be nice, but when you're laying things out, it's easier to do it planimetrically, so you can see it. And that is what we've done. As Cindy alluded to, it would require 2 rows of evergreens or something else. And what we've done is the or something else, which we think is a much better fit for the site. So as you can see, as she zooms in here, there's much more than 2 rows of plantings to infill the landscaping that's already there. The entrance is to the east of the building, which as you're coming down Waterford Parkway South, the landscaping's on your right will shield the building. Same with from the highway, you're driving northbound. To see the building, you'd have to whip around to look out the side almost about 4 o'clock, maybe 3:30, to come back and look at the building. And
yeah, not if you're going south though.
So I drove this weekend. I had to make a Costco trip, and there's a little bit of a traveling southbound. It's lower elevation, so the median blocks viewing it. You can't look over the median towards the building. It's blocked by the higher elevation in the median. So the northbound lane is I don't know significantly, but it's definitely higher than the southbound lane. So the view would be from traveling northbound, and you'd have to be looking back at about 3:30, 4 o'clock or so to look back at the
looking backwards. That's correct.
Okay. With respect to the traffic study, to either Mr. Kua or Fussin O'Neill, was it taken into consideration? And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I think it was mentioned that there would be wide loads when there was an initial meeting on the pre-application meeting, informal meeting with us. I had brought up the topic of whether they would be wide loads, and I thought they it was indicated that there was some wide loads. How does that affect the traffic study, if at all, especially on Parkway that is not very wide to begin with?
If I may, this is Kermit, KWH Enterprise LLC. I think the constraints for wide loads is mainly at the intersections, because the width of the it's mainly, you know, tractor trailers, you know, make a wide turns at a hinge, right? I believe the site engineer has demonstrated by running auto turn using the auto turn software, those wide turning movements can be accommodated both on site and at a side driveway on Parkway South. As for the part of Parkway South west of the intersection and all on Cross Road, I believe those are DOT intersections. They were designed with tractor trailer traffic in mind. In other words, you know, they have a highway design manual to see to make sure those vehicles can be accommodated at exit ramps of interstates. So, and plus you also have an existing Coca-Cola plants there. I assume they also have large tractor trailer traffic. So in other words, there are already, you know, the roadways are already designed to accommodate those vehicles. That's all I have.
Greg, are you talking about standard trailer truck width and length, or are you talking about oversized loads, which require special permit?
I'm talking about tractor trailers, not those that need special permit. No.
Yeah, no.
WB 65 is sort of a. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, Greg Massad. Greg.
Greg, you're muted.
Not there. That's what I'm trying to do is find out what the question was from Mr. Massad. And he was mentioning wide load. And when I'm asking the question is, was he referring to special permit wide load or just standard trailer truck traffic? And I must have lost him. All right, well, we can pick that up at another time. Okay, is there anybody else who has questions or concerns?
John, I just have one more question for Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell, have you had an opportunity to see the video at Exhibit 28? It's a video of the operation of the gantry crane.
I've not, no.
Okay. Well, I'd like to have you look at that at some point, because my question for you, and my questions for anybody on this panel, is in your report, as a mitigating factor, you say that that low noise gantry cranes with fully enclosed engine compartments will be used. My question for you is whether that gantry crane in that video is one of those low noise cranes. So I know you haven't seen the video, so you can't answer. And
We'll be happy to look at the video and compare it to what we looked at and also what we anticipate as being on site.
Great, I appreciate that.
All right, any further questions? Do we want to open it up to the public? All right, at this point, I think we're going to open it up to the public. I'm going to request that anybody who wishes to speak identify themselves and their residence, please. And also try to limit comments to, say, between 3 and 4 minutes at this point because of the interest of time. So is there anybody who would like to speak for or against this application?
Myra, I see your hand. I'm going to unmute you, and if you'd like to speak, you can go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Myra Amsden. I live at 40 Rockwood Drive here in Waterford. I've been kind of trying to play catch up with all of this. I really want to thank everybody for all of the information, the town, everybody on the commissions that, you know, the information that you're putting together, the third party reviews. I had submitted a letter a while back. I've not attended a public hearing such as this. So if it's just a matter of me reestablishing my statement, that's fine. I did have a couple of questions from what I've heard tonight. If I should follow up with that, I will do so.
Yes,
Excuse me?
the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. My concerns, I've lived here now for 15 years. I'm about a stone's throw away down Devonshire Drive. So I'm at the southbound side of where this is being planned, and all of my concerns mainly just come from an environmental aspect. The pictures that I have looked at, their other plants, this looks to be the largest plant that they will be creating. I am also interested. One man said there were 5 locations. I only know of 4. I'd like to know where that 5th location is to get some history on that. But I am concerned very much about the 2 brooks that they are looking to build between. These 2 brooks do have a substantial downward effect through most of the town into and outgoing out through Jordan Cove into the Sound. And I just feel that is, you know, from that perspective, removing 40 acres of land up to potentially 180 acres at a future time. This can have a very significant impact on the reclaimed natural space that has occurred over the last 30 years at this property. You know, we've got a lot of natural wildlife that use these brooks to move in and navigate through our neighborhoods. The wild turkeys, the duck, the geese, the herons. So I do have concerns. When I did listen to the environmental commission, that they identified that they would only test the brook water for the first 4 years. They were only requiring that. So what long-term requirements would we have for ensuring safe groundwater past those 4 years? I have the same issues and questions that have come up from board members and other people regarding the noise, the downstream effect of the way noise funnels through that cavern. Does impact those of us south of Devonshire. We get to enjoy the sounds of the Waterford Speed Bowl from time to time as well, which is double the distance away from where this plant will be. And it's a concrete manufacturing plant with limited to no long-term benefit for the environment that's around us. And that's really my main concerns that I wanted to bring to the town. Besides my letter, I will follow up with additional questions now that I'm getting more information here tonight. So I do thank everybody for the information that they're sharing. In addition to that, just one last item that I did want to mention. I believe that it came up at your last meeting. One of the board members did ask and mentioned and referenced the Fuss O'Neill review, particularly regarding protecting the wildlife to schedule construction outside of the breeding seasons. And even though some birds of concern may not have been identified during Fuss and O'Neill's review, or whoever, I'm sorry, created this, did the environmental review, that does not necessarily mean that those animals are not there. So what can we do besides, thank you, Mr. Goodrow, for mentioning the fact of that they clear land at a slow pace. not impact such a wide environment, you know, of ripping out 40 acres at one time. But I just, you know, from the standpoint of where I live in Waterford, I have concerns about the groundwater, the runoff. Will they maintain it over time? You know, where will we be 15, 20 years from now with this thing sitting in between those brooks? So I thank you for your time and allowing me to express my concerns.
All right, you're welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Mr. Commissioner, this is John Bashaw. I was wondering if somebody might be able to answer her question about where are the 5 plants?
I'd like to respond. I misspoke. The 4 plants are in Minnesota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kansas. This will be the 5th.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Hi, it's me again. If I could then just go back to the discussion about the sound. No complaints from the senior living facility in Savage, Minnesota. And I don't know if anybody has looked at the history of Savage. Granted, it looks as if the plant was there first since 1971. That is their flagship plant. The population of Savage, Minnesota has grown over 50% since the year 2000. So they've significantly, they're only 20 miles south of Minneapolis, I believe. So more of a crawling suburb from a large city. Same as the plant in Ohio. It's within the Columbus area proper. So more commercialized, more industrialized type areas, to which we do not see here because we are not connected to any such large cities. And whether or not there's noise complaints, I'm sure that the senior center assisted living facility came after the plant itself. So I just want to point that out. Really kind of difficult to compare Waterford to any of these other 4 towns based on location, size, and what they offer in terms of employment and whatnot. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? This is your opportunity. Once the public hearing is closed, you will no longer have an opportunity, so.
If anyone is having trouble with the raise hand feature in Zoom, you can certainly unmute yourself and speak if you're having trouble with that feature.
I'll ask for a second time. Is there anybody who would like to speak for or against this application? Third and last time for this evening. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against this application?
Okay, Mary, I see you. I'm gonna go ahead and take your hand down and you can speak.
Okay, I was wondering approximately how long it would take to construct this facility.
So before the chair entertains, if he's going to entertain any answering of questions right now, can you just give your full name and address for the record?
I'm sorry, it's Mary Muto, and I'm at 353 Boston Post Road here in Waterford.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have an answer for her? Go ahead, sir.
The facility will take approximately 12 months to construct from start to finish, but there will be process improvements occurring inside the building for 2-3 months after that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, can I go on?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. The reason why I'm asking is I'm wondering how long, I'm sure the construction vehicles don't have that backup signal that's very quiet. So it's going to be a noisy construction, correct?
I'd like to respond a little bit. First of all, most of the construction will be contained down near where the building construction site is, which takes it farther away from existing sensitive receptors. The activities of construction generally is limited to mostly daytime activity, probably via Waterford code itself, but there may be need to do some late night activities, sometimes concrete pours and stuff, but for the most part, you would expect that the construction would take place during daytime hours. And although there is earthwork and some site work activities that will extend across the site, the bulk of that 12-month construction cycle will be, and Jeff Prince can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, but would be more localized to the footprint of the building.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak for or against? I say for the second time, is there anybody who would like to speak for or against?
Karen has her hand up, but maybe after public comment.
Somebody has their hand up.
It's Karen.
Okay. Karen?
Hi, Karen Barnett. Just wanted to confirm, John, when you were asking about the Abbey comments and you referenced the 23.5, was that in reference to the water consumption issue? And they were going to get back to us?
I was not specifically referencing that. I was just, actually, it was a comment that Mark had made in his October 19th memo regarding the content of the narrative statement provided on section 23.5. So I was not specifically addressing that, but to the extent as such, and I know Abby has that in the, I think her last comment, it is something that I would be looking for the applicant to respond to for the next meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was brought up. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against? For the second time, is there anybody who would like to speak for or against? Third and last time, is there anybody who would like to speak for or against? Okay. So at this point, we want to.
If the applicant has opportunities to rebut, or they can defer to the next meeting. And then the recommendation would be to continue the public hearing to the November 9th regular meeting of the commission.
Right. Does the applicant want to rebut anything that's been said at this point, or do you want to defer to the next meeting?
I think a few of these we could probably check off if we have a few minutes.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. Just with regard to the Fuss and O'Neill comments from Keith and Mark, thank you guys for those. We don't have to address those now. We won't get into those. Obviously, the response letter is forthcoming. I think you said you would receive it tomorrow, so we will respond in kind to those with a subsequent follow-up letter to that. So I won't have to go into that. So the next was John had some comments that I think we kind of discussed as we went along. One of them, compliance with special permit, that we haven't received that email from Mark yet, so we'll have to address that at a later date. Greg obviously had voiced a couple concerns, some of the landscaping that I think we've tried to talk about today, but I think maybe a little bit more information we'll have to deal with next time. So I think most of it is just the public comment. I just wanted to, while they're here, I think it's best to offer a response if we have them. For Myra, I know she already submitted a letter. Thank you for that. She was concerned about some of the environmental concerns. She said we were removing about 40 acres of woodland. So the site it's a redevelopment. The 40 acres, as you saw from the plan, it's kind of fits right where the Waterford Airport used to be. we're reutilizing some of our access road is the former runways. So the 40 acres is mostly previously developed. The growth that you see in there is scrub undergrowth that's occurred since the airport. So we're not taking a forest and clear cutting the whole thing for 40 acres. So we're trying to redevelop as much of the property that was already previously developed. So we're trying to maintain that use in that area. There's no plans for developing anything beyond that. Again, mentioned developing potentially up to 189 acres. There's nothing in the plans for that. There's no proposal for that. They're not looking to do that from everything I've been told. She mentioned water quality monitoring for 4 years. I believe that's to the town, but I believe maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but the industrial permit that has to be submitted to the state requires stormwater monitoring. So we have to provide to the state, not just to the town. That was a town requirement. They want us to provide information to the town for the next 4 years, but the state requires it for longer than 4 years.
What's that time frame?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know it exactly. So but it is longer than the 4 years. I can get back to you on that. With regard to construction outside the breeding season, what the breeding bird report recommends is what he said is that the birds, the reason he was hired was for 2 specific birds to research. He didn't find those, but he did make a recommendation to limit the clearing. So you're not clearing birds' nests or anything like that between the off season, which is between, I think it's September to March. So as long as we complete our clearing between September and March, then we're consistent with his recommendation. That the whole point of that is so we're not destroying their nests or anything like that. So I think some of your concerns were the environmental concerns were centered between Nevins Brook and Jordan Brook. We know that it's a very sensitive water course. Fussin O'Neill prepared a very extensive report in 2000, Jordan Brook Watershed Management Study. We have to comply with that. That's what we have been doing. And one of the requirements is that you infiltrate up to the 10-year storm event, which is, I've never seen it anywhere else. Usually it's, the water quality volume, which is a 1-inch storm. But in this, along the watershed, along Jordan Brook, to infiltrate the 10-year storm is to remove all the pollutants. It's a very conservative approach to maintaining the environment and the groundwater that's getting to Jordan Brook into Nevins Brook. So I believe, we've already gone through Conservation Commission. I didn't go into length and depth of the details of the stormwater. That's all in the stormwater report. I don't know if it was necessary, but I do want to point out that there are substantial stormwater provisions included with this provision, including pretreatment and infiltrating the 10-year storm event. So we're hoping as well to be a good neighbor to the environment. So hopefully that alleviates some of those concerns. Mary had just a couple questions. I think Jeff already answered how long is construction, and then actually Karen just mentioned something about Mark's email that we have to get to. So unless anybody else has anything, unless anybody from our team has anything else that they would like to talk about, or if Mary has a question about any of our responses, I'm sorry, Myra. If Myra has any questions, we can certainly take those again. Otherwise, I think that's probably it for tonight for me.
All right, thank you. Okay, what are we looking for? Continuous?
Motion to continue to the November 9th regular meeting.
All right, so at this point, we had no further comment from the public. The applicant had an opportunity to rebut anything that was said. So I would be looking for a continuance of this public hearing to our November 9th meeting. So if I could get that in a form of a motion, I would appreciate it.
This is John Bashaw, motion. I move that we continue the public hearing until our next meeting on November 9th to 2020.
Thank you, John.
And I'll second that. This is Tim Bleasdale.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
All right, I am in agreement also, so motion is passed. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to item number 5, application reviews. Nothing? Item number 6, correspondence?
No correspondence,
No correspondence. Number 7, administrative review.
nothing there either.
Wow. And item number 8 would be adjournment.
We may have something.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you, John. Do I have a second?
Second, Craig.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good.